Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. Yesterday we talked about the breaker boys. We talked about child labor laws, how they were created because of the poor working conditions, the hazardous working conditions for children during the early 1900s and late 1800s. And I want to transition a little bit. I want to talk about progressive African American movements during this time period as well. So, how equality opportunities are going to be presented to another minority group in the United States, okay, and how betterment is on its way, okay, and how advancement is going to be presented and expressed, and movements are going to form to try to benefit society for all Americans. Okay, so bell ringer for today, reviewing yesterday what we talked about. So describe the hardships and horrors for children working in the industries and in the coal mines during the late 1800s and early 1900s. Detail their specific jobs, why they were forced to work, and how life for children progressed during the Progressive Era. So please pause the video, write down your response, and I'm going to go over it. So real quick, life for children before the Progressive Era was strict to the household, helping out the mother, preparing food, working out in the garden, and for the most part, helping, let's say, their father with life on the farm. And typically during this time period before the Progressive Era, before industrialization took hold, family members, okay, parents, were trying to have as many kids as possible. More children, the more workers you have, really. And then during industrialization, okay, when these wages were so low, the family members needed to have their children to work to help provide for the family, help afford to put food on the table. All right, so parents forced their children out into the workplace to help provide for the family, to help supply the items that are needed to live because wages were so low before this progressive era really occurred and really happened. So it was needed for children to go out and work. These industries wanted children to work. Why? Because the wages were even significantly lower for children. These big industries, these business owners didn't have to pay the children near as much as what they would for an adult. So lower wages. Okay. Also, well, with these mechanisms, these new forms of innovations in these industries and these factories, they would often break down. And they needed someone smaller to fit in these tight places to fix whatever's wrong with these mechanisms, whether it's a gear shaft that's clogged up with some sort of debris. Get in there and unclog it. Okay. And because they're smaller, could fit in tighter spaces, children were essential in the workplace. But what would happen? Well, there's a lot of hazards. There were no safety protocols for the children. As they would go in and, let's say, try to unclog the gear shaft, maybe their arm would get caught in and ripped off. Many individuals, children, died during this time period in the industries, in the factories. Do you think they cared, these business owners? Nope. Grab the body that's mangled up, give it back to the family, or often throw it out and keep the industries going, right? Keep producing goods, keep producing finalized products. It was very unfortunate times. Something needed to be done. All right. Also, we talked about the breaker boys in the mines, especially right around central PA, huge with anthracite coal. So these children would often work on these chutes. Okay, as described in the video yesterday. Hopefully, you guys watched it. The breaker boys, interesting story. These individuals, these children, would obviously work for 10, 15 hours a day. Crazy amount of time. They had no time to be a kid. Literally, they had to go work. And they would often sit on these chutes, okay, on this plank of wood for long hours and try to sort through the unwanted minerals from the coal as it was being dropped down. Literally, it was like a slide, like a chute. And these children would throw out the unwanted materials and oftentimes really mangling their hands. Okay, in the video, it showed an individual that worked in these coal mines in the early 1900s, and his fingers were literally mangled, right? His hands were beat up from long time ago. Okay, in working in these mines, and it was a very terrible time. Obviously, working in the mines, there wasn't much oxygen. Many of these children had black lung. right? Breathing in this coal dirt, this debris, right? Or really the moisture down into the mines, getting into their lungs, and many individuals dying from pneumonia, and literally drowning from the inside out, literally, as their lungs would fill up with fluid. Right. Also, working down the mines, well, we know the carts that carry this coal, very heavy, and they would be on like almost like railroad ties, right? Or like really a railroad track. And if these children didn't get out of the way in time, they're crushed by it. Well, same thing. Grab the body, throw it out of the way, keep it moving with production and extracting this valuable material. Another thing, many of the children were used to open and close the doors down in the mine. So again, if that big wagon full of coal is rolling down, the railroad, and well, really the railway, and if they didn't get out of the way, the door would slam open, smack them, pretty much kill them instantly. So it was very terrible conditions for children. All right, so some movement in 1916, the Keating-Owens Act, was placed to help betterment opportunities for children to get out of the workplace in these hazardous conditions, because everybody knew what lifestyle they were living. Okay, and that worked for about 2 years until the Supreme Court transitioned and overthrew it. Why? 1916 is building up to World War One. It's already happening in Europe. The United States is going to get involved in 1917. Someone had to fill the factories to help with production, right? Help with preparing the U.S. for war. So the children took a lot of the men's places in these industries and these factories to create weapons, armored vehicles, you name it. Okay, and really, the business owners, they controlled politics at that time. Right, they're paying off political figures. They're paying off politicians to make sure that their businesses can still operate with the use of child labor. So really, they had these business owners had a stranglehold of society in America for a long time until this progressive era actually pushed forward. Right, and then eventually, 1936, right, mid 1930s, child labor laws officially would be enacted by Congress. And in all reality, it was because of the Depression era, right? These businesses, these factories were already closed, so they didn't need workers. Right? Unfortunate, but a lot of these movements really brought forth a lot of change in the United States, and an idea that the children, the kids, should be in school, being educated to understand concepts of the world and sciences to make and to try to prepare the U.S. in the future for a better society, to always advance. So that's that transition right around the 1930s, that Depression time period. And we know World War II is right around the corner. So there you go, guys. That is the bell ringer for today. Hopefully you write that down and really described all of what I said. Terms for today, talk about progressive African Americans. We have Plessy versus Ferguson, 1896. That's kind of what everything kicks off this separate but equal idea in the United States. Not really equal though. W.B. Du Bois. So if you have me for sociology, famous, progressive as well. Booker T. Washington. Okay, again, a progressive during this time period, advancement of colored people. NAACP. Okay, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. That's what it means. All right, so pause the video, write down your description, your definitions for these terms, have them ready to go. Like I mentioned, early next week, I'll probably have a test. So make sure you guys are writing down these vocab terms. All right, so today I just want to go over a few slides. And I want you guys to look at a literacy test, and I'll have that posted. But progressive African Americans. So right after the Civil War, we know that African Americans didn't really have the opportunity to education. Many of these individuals were outcasted. Right? No one wanted them in their communities, not only in the South, but in the North. So politics was really skewed against these people from being involved in American society. Opportunities were stripped from them. And in many cases, people believe that, well, was their life any better? It's hard to say. But with that being said, with the African American movements, okay, we're going to see a lot of advancement, especially with two famous progressives, Booker T. Washington and W.B. Du Bois. All right. So with that, in the early 1900s, this minority group in the United States, these African Americans, as women were gaining their right to vote, as children were gaining more opportunities in the workplace, and to get out of the workplace to go to school, African Americans were left in the dust, really. It was a sad, unfortunate thing. So one of the things that really kicked off this unfortunate events for African Americans is Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896. This was this separate but equal idea. So Plessy, he was an African American, and he was trying to ride public transportation, and he bought his ticket. And as he was about ready to board the train, he wasn't able to. Well, he looked at the African American rail cart, and it really was broken down. The seats weren't even really there. And he viewed and looked over at the other train car, which was for whites. And he said, "You know what? I'm going to go sit on it. Sit in a seat in a white cart. Why? Because, well, they actually have seats. He paid a ticket for it, and he wanted to make sure that he could have a suited condition riding on this train. Okay, I believe he was going to New Orleans, and clearly this ended poorly for him. All right, the train security guard director, he came back and said, "Hey, get out of here. I don't know what you're trying to do. This is for white people only. Okay, you are reverted to the rail car for blacks, for African Americans." He said, "No, I paid a ticket like everybody else. This is unbelievable. I should be able to sit in this rail car. Okay, I paid the ticket. Here it is." He said, "Yeah, but look at your skin, your color, right? You need to be reverted to the train cart that is for you." And this went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court actually ruled this separate but equal idea. Okay, to make sure that these public facilities, these institutions, were separated for African Americans, colored, and for whites. So restaurants, okay, public transportation, schools, education, they were all separate. Okay, you had your specific for white, which was way more advanced, right? More modernized. Okay, it was a lot nicer. And then you had for African Americans, for blacks, which were really shambles. Okay, it was really slapped together with the least amount of idea and knowledge to help these people out. Okay, education especially, there really were no teachers because the funding for it wasn't there. Okay, and these individuals, these teachers didn't get paid well, so you're getting candidates, you're getting educators that really might not know a topic or concepts as well. So the education, when you look at the opportunities, when you look at the equality of it, it was it wasn't even comparable. Like I mentioned with the train cars, right? Even buses, these seats were really not even there. Okay, many of these individuals had that were African Americans, that were colored. They didn't have the same, I guess you could say, public facilities, okay, public forms of transportation as whites. It was very terrible time. It was not great whatsoever. And the separate but equal mentality would travel all the way up into the 1960s. Right? It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And we won't see change until really the civil rights movement in the United States. So what needed to happen? Well, progressives, key progressives like W.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, they tried to fight for the advancement of colored people in the United States, to try to make it equal for for African Americans in the United States society. So W.B. Du Bois, real quick, if you want to write this down, this is very important. He described, well, the only way we're going to seek opportunity and advancement for colored people in American society is through education, through academics. Right. So if African Americans can sit at a table and communicate political ideals, can discuss important information of, let's say, current events of what's going around in the world, then this will bridge the gap. This will try to create more opportunities for African Americans in society. Right. Education needs to be paramount. Okay. Academics for African Americans needs to be at the leading edge to try to bridge this gap and try to eliminate this segregation, this separation in the U.S. Okay, so building opportunities, the only way W.B. Du Bois believes is by education, through academics. Right? If African Americans, white citizens at that time in the United States, can sit down and talk, discuss about really anything at an educated level, then this would advance African Americans and opportunities in the U.S. Booker T. Washington, he also believed education was essential, but he also believed that skills, vocational skills, were needed. And what I mean by vocational skills is the workplace. okay, workplace, really education and methods and techniques that African Americans need to know and be trained with to prepare them for really their future. Okay. Booker T. Washington thought, well, if you have a white man and a colored man working together in the workplace, okay, this is going to bridge a gap. They need to work together in this factory, obviously, to create products, to create finalized goods. This is going to create a relationship, a bond between these people to overall end segregation and separation in the United States. So technical skills, vocational skills, he believed that the workplace is where African Americans are going to gain these opportunities, these equal opportunities. Right. So Booker T. Washington, more focused vocational skills, workplace, and W.B. Du Bois mostly focused on education, academics. Okay. And Booker T. Washington will go on to lead for the Tuskegee Institute in the United States. And later we'll talk about the Tuskegee Airmen when we get to World War II and how this was an all African American, all colored school to train these air fighters, which is a remarkable story. We'll get to when we get to World War II. All right, so what led to advancement? Well, progressive movements. Okay, W.B. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington, right? They thought, well, we need to try to link together. We need to try to understand history, literature, philosophy, and communicate these skills, this education amongst one another, to try to bridge this gap to end segregation in the United States. The only way African Americans can advance in society in this early 1900s idea in the United States as separate but equal is to advance with education's academics, vocational skills. And this was a belief amongst all progressives in the United States to fight against some of the harsh realities that African Americans were facing. And we all know in the North and the South, some of these groups were these hate groups like the KKK were doing their best to try to push out African Americans from U.S. society, American society, from the citizens, the white citizens in the U.S. Okay, so with the Great Migration, we'll talk about in the 1920s. Okay, with African Americans really gaining that equality, the opportunity through these progressive movements, we have hate groups like the KKK trying to push out these African Americans from society by lynching, literally killing them in the streets, burning crosses in their front yards, trying to literally force these people out of their communities, even by killing them. It's very unfortunate. And at this time period, many politicians, they kind of just turned a blind eye. The police, the state, really the authority, they turned a blind eye, right? They just didn't want to get involved with this situation. And some police and politicians joined in on the lynching of these African Americans. Very sad time. The only way we can advance is through these progressive movements, through these peaceful acts of advancement, of activism. All right, so this led to the NAACP to form and still around today. So the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. It's originating, okay, because of a lynch mob really in Springfield, Illinois, and how this led to this movement to form to try to protect African American lives, the right to vote, and the civil rights movement really kicking off in this early 1900s. Okay, again, we'll see more of a push in the 1960s with Martin Luther King Jr., with Malcolm X, right? But the NAACP is a group formed to try to advance African Americans in American society. All right, so that's all I have for today. So I'm going to attach a literacy test that was performed back in the day. I'd like you guys to check it out. I think it's interesting, and many people really you can't complete it. Even today, Harvard students, I'll show a video as well. These Harvard students really can't get it done. And it's really to show how impossible these literacy tests were for African Americans to vote, to have a say in government. Many southern states especially put out these literacy tests to try to prevent African Americans to vote. And the only way they can do it is by passing this literacy test. No one passed it. I'm just going to come out and say it. But if any of them came close, they were met by a white mob in front of the polls to vote, which obviously they didn't get past that white mob. Okay, especially in the South. Okay, even in northern areas in the United States. And also you'll see assignment for the NAACP. Please read that and answer the questions. Have that completed for tomorrow. All right, guys. Hey, we'll see you later. Take care. Have a good one.